Hi folks, Andrew Lee again with Tagiuk Gold. I'm here out on West Beach of Nome, and behind me is my first Nome gold dredge. This is an 8-inch platform that I bought in an auction in 2005 and brought up to Nome in 2006, my first year up here offshore mining. It's a pretty good platform. You know, it had 2 foot diameter pontoons. Nice steel, thick steel, pretty heavy. We had amphibious dredges back then because we're so far from the harbor, we didn't want to go back and forth. So we put wheels on these, unpowered wheels, and then we towed it out of the water with ATVs or a tracked vehicle. Snow track is what we used, which had a Volkswagen engine. It was a bit dicey from time to time, but pretty interesting platform. It's out here at our old camp. Here is our other dredge. So this one I custom designed and built from the ground up so it would fit in a 20-foot container and all packed up, and then get to Nome and unpack and a few welds, and there we go. And thing is, I didn't know at the time, but I should have used thicker steel. I think this is 12 gauge steel. I should have used 1/8-inch steel. Would have made it heavier, but would have made it last longer. I also didn't do partitions. It's all one cell, which is of course not ideal, but I didn't know any better at the time, or didn't think about it at the time. I was more concerned about weight. Again, this was amphibious, has 8 big wheels on it, and this one, yeah, 8 big wheels. 4 axles, 2 axles per pontoon, and we would haul it right out of the water. Of course, sometimes we get pushed sideways, etc. This property is now owned by Kerr with Arctic Gold, and behind me are a couple of his surf crawlers. Now these are pretty interesting machines. They don't float. What they do is they drive from the beach into the surf, and the water line is the height of that beam somewhere, and it digs like an excavator dredge. Well, it is an excavator dredge, but it's not a floating excavator dredge. So Ken Kerr and Dave Young have 2 of these, and they're parked out here right now because they're focused on the Myrtle Irene. From time to time they come out and they run them, and they can watch this camp from the Myrtle Irene out in the water, or from the water. They drive by quite frequently. Actually, when I pulled in, within 15 minutes someone drove up to see who I was and what I was doing here, so that's pretty good. Of course, it was George, so he recognized me. But these surf crawlers are pretty interesting. I think there were about 6 of these total built for Nome, and they're not really used much anymore because the amount of ground that they can cover, the ground that they can access is pretty limited, and that got used up pretty quickly. So some of these are being used inland. It's just such a small platform. They take giant tracks and they put a smaller excavator on top and a wash plant with these big rails. It's a nice system. There's just not enough ground. If there's more ground, these would be all running away, churning away. But the wash plant's kind of small, so it makes it inefficient. You know, the bigger the wash plant you can have, the more you can slow the material down and screen it and process it better. But this is what, a 3/4 yard bucket. So the bucket on my new dredge is 20 yard. So quite a bit more material per scoop, but this one had probably a 1-minute cycle time, whereas I have a 4 to 6 minute cycle time. Really interesting contraptions. Kind of ingenious. A guy named Jim came up with a design for these. He lives in Bakersfield, so they had a lot of these. California deemed them too polluting, so they tore apart and perfectly good engines to save the environment, and caused them to build all new equipment. So he got these tracks really cheap, and then put a bigger excavator, or a small excavator, on the big tracks. Here's the Bering Sea, and you got looks like Christine Rose is out there working. Got Judy Ann over here working on her leases, and then over here you got AU Grabber with the new owners also working on Tomcod leases. So I don't see any diver dredges out on West Beach today, and on East Beach I only saw one diver dredge. So I don't know what the deal is. It might be too turbid after that storm. There was no dredging going on for about 6 days. Since my last video, there's only been dredging for 1 day or 2 days with the bigger dredges. And that's pretty common, that when the south wind kicks up the ocean and it's really hard to see. So even after the wind dives, the water's nice and flat, but it's too murky to see. And a lot of divers just don't like black water diving, especially when it's for gold mining, when they can't see what they're doing. It's they can't follow the gold as well, so they end up making a mess of the gold field, and it's just not as effective. So they'd rather save their energy for after it settles down. Nome's out that way, and of course Christine Rose, the AU Grabber. There's Sledge Island. It's a kind of a barrier island outside of Norton Sound. Once you get past Sledge Island, it gets into the real Bering Sea, and that's where the water gets a lot more rough and tumble, and that's where I'd want a real boat. But Norton Sound, all these little boats do just fine for most of the time. Of course, my new boat's a real boat, so yeah, there's not much that can happen in Norton Sound that worry me. Alright, thanks for joining. Subscribe if you haven't already. Tell your friends. And, the more subscribers I get, the more videos I make. If people aren't watching and people aren't subscribing, I'm not going to waste my time. But I just came out here today to check it out, because I haven't been out here in about a year. So, thought I would see what is up. Alright, take care.